Hello everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to introduce a brand new indicator here on the channel, the Trend Confidence Indicator. If you like the content and remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and follow us on Twitter where we put out regular updates about our risk indicators and more. So the idea behind this indicator that as I was trying to build it, as I was working on it and thinking about it, I wanted some kind of an indicator that could get a sense of how likely a given trend is to continue, or when we might start getting worried about potentially an uptrend petering out or a downtrend petering out. So, on the channel we have the upside downside potential indicator that gives us ideas about risk. But really with the risk indicator, that's just kind of giving a general sense of how risky it is. But it's not necessarily saying that a given trend is likely to reverse or not. It's just saying, generally speaking, in the coming months or whatever the case may be, here's how much realistic upside versus downside potential there is. So I wanted something that was focused more on the trends themselves. So if we're in kind of a specific semi-local uptrend or semi-local downtrend, how confident can we be that that trend is going to continue, and when might we get early signs of that trend potentially showing, looking like it might reverse? So something that can be a bit of a leading indicator to tell us when the trend might be shifting. So that was the goal behind this indicator. And so the reason I call it the Trend Confidence Indicator is that's exactly what it's trying to tell us. Essentially, it's giving us a way of gauging how confident we can be in the current trend, and then when signs are showing up that maybe the trend is petering out or is likely to reverse in the not too distant future. So what I'm showing you here is a bit messy. I'm going to break this down so it's a lot clearer in a minute here. But this is just the raw output of the TCI Trend Confidence Indicator across time, with the y-axis being values of the Trend Confidence Indicator, and then the yellow line here being Bitcoin's price across history. So this is the TCI for Bitcoin I'm showing you right here. So I should note that even though the range of the TCI on this graph is -4 to 4, that's kind of arbitrary. The technical limit is technically infinite on top and bottom. There's no bound. It's not range bound, this particular indicator. But just so happens that the TCI for Bitcoin happens to range between 4 and -4. So that's what I'm showing you here. So the way that you can read this indicator is that scores above 0 are bullish, scores below 0 are bearish. And so one way that we can look at it is if I just color code based on that. So anything above 0 is green, is bullish. That's what we like to see. That's suggesting of a positive move or of a positive trend. And then red would be negative, suggesting of a downward trend. So you'll notice that there are little blips of green and red above and below 0 here. That's just it carrying over the color from the previous day to the next one. So whenever it's crossing over 0, you're going to get a little bit of bleed over. But essentially, green is going to be a day that closed above 0. Red's going to be a day that closed below 0, kind of when those lines start. So just to clarify why that's happening on this chart. So essentially the way that you can read this is, the idea is that, let's say we're in a macro downtrend and we want to get an idea of when that downtrend might be weakening or might be flipping. Well, if you're in a downtrend and the TCI is in the red, is below 0, that can give you some confidence that that downtrend is continuing, that there isn't reason yet to believe the downtrend is going to break. But if you're in a downtrend and suddenly the TCI flips green, then that might be an indicator that maybe this trend is starting to lose its momentum to the downside. Maybe this downward trajectory is likely to flip sometime in the not too distant future. And the same thing with uptrends. If you're in an uptrend and it's green, that's great. That's what you want to see. If you're in an uptrend and it flips red, that's a bad thing. That means that that uptrend might be near its end. So again, this is not telling the same information as the upside downside potential indicator, which is about kind of macro risk. Are we in a high risk or a low risk zone? Is the upside versus downside potential high or low? This is really talking about those localized trends. And I do think that this indicator could be used in conjunction with the UDPI. If you're at high risk and suddenly the TCI flips red, that's especially bearish. If you're low risk and the TCI flips green, that might be especially bullish, for example. But this is not giving you risk information like the upside downside potential indicator. This is all about confidence in the trend. So I want to show a different view of this that I think can just makes it a little bit easier to visualize. And then I'm going to flip back to this chart because there's some interesting behavior I want to talk about after that. So to flip over to this chart here, what I'm showing you here is just the different trends in the TCI across time, color coded on the price action of Bitcoin. So this is a TCI. I've set it going all the way to 5 to -5, but we know it's largely bound to the 4 to -4. But really, what you want to look for is that kind of around 0. I've left it kind of being this zone of a little bit of uncertainty, kind of this transition point between -1 to 1, kind of going through 0, being that key cutoff point. And then anything green is clearly positive, anything red is clearly negative. Well, you can see that TCI does a good job over time of identifying these uptrends as well as these downtrends, and it also oftentimes acts as a leading indicator. Like you'll notice here, it starts to get to flip green even before the actual bottom comes in. That's giving you a warning ahead of time that maybe this downtrend isn't going to last all that much longer before we start moving back up. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. You know, we get the downtrend, then it starts flipping green, we go up. Then we get flips red, then it flips green, we go up, etc., throughout time. So you'll notice that these green zones happen higher than the red zones, which is what you'd want with this kind of a trend indicator. It's saying that when it's green, that's indicative of an uptrend, red is indicative of a downtrend. And then it can also give you information about when you might want to start getting concerned. So I'm going to talk about this more specifically in a minute, zoom in on this. But you'll notice that in this 2020 to 2021 bull run going up into the spring, you'll notice it gets very concerned at the top here. In fact, it flips completely red by the time we get up to the actual top here, suggesting that this is a very dangerous place to be. That this uptrend that we were in is unlikely to be able to continue, and indeed that then presaged that massive 50+% move to the downside. But then also you'll see in the summer it flipped green well before the actual that actual reversal, suggesting that we should have been taking notice at that point that maybe this downtrend in the summer was reaching its end and that a bullish move was potentially going to come, and indeed that's what happened. And it even did it again at the November top. You'll see how it flipped red very quickly. It's getting very much more uncertain in this move up, and then that presaged this big 50% crash to the downside. And now we're actually flipping back into the green with this move back up again. So I want to talk more about that in a minute, but I do just think an interesting thing about this indicator is its ability to act as a leading indicator. So a lot of trend reversal indicators that you'll see out kind of on TradingView or elsewhere are lagging indicators inherently. They have to wait for price action to do something impressive to the upside or notable to the downside before they'll flip bearish or bullish. This indicator can actually be a canary in the coal mine. It can actually identify when a downtrend is likely to be petering out before the downtrend is even completed. It's just giving you an advance warning that, hey, pay attention. This might be a time where a bottom might be coming in relatively soon. And I think that's notable because other trend indicators do not do that. They're not built to do that. They're not intended to do that. So this can give some different information from the other indicators that are already out there. And I think that's quite valuable, right? The idea of having advanced warning that, getting into late July of 2021 was a point where a big move to the upside is likely to come. I think that's pretty useful, and it's in some ways more beneficial than having to wait for that move to start before getting the trend reversal to flip, which is what a lot of other trend reversals indicators will do. So that's one of the things I think is an advantage of this indicator. And I also want to talk about some other behaviors this indicator has done throughout Bitcoin's history that have been quite interesting and I think quite useful in some ways as well. So the one thing I want to talk about is how it behaves around tops, around market cycle tops. So you'll notice in the 2011-2012 top here, the 2013 top, and the 2017 top, there's this very distinctive pattern that emerges on the TCI where it actually will spike before the actual top. So the highest point on the TCI for each of these tops is actually a little bit before the actual top. It's a little hard to see, but it is a little bit before. You can see it here. It's spiking up actually closer to here, and then actually putting a lower high on the actual top. Same in 2013. Spikes up before the actual top, puts in a lower high at the top. 2017. Spikes up before the actual top, lower high at the actual top. And then you get this precipitous drop to the downside right afterwards. Immediately after this, just dive down to below zero right afterwards. And that can be seen as kind of confirming the top is in, right? So you get this explosion upwards and then this tank downwards that kind of confirms that the top is in, and then it will stay bearish for a while after that, confirming that the top is in and we're moving back to the downside before, it might flip bullish again if you're getting these kind of relief bumps that tend to happen after those blow off top type moments. But really, that's kind of a distinctive pattern that you can notice that I think is quite interesting and notable. The other thing I think is really interesting about this indicator is looking for divergences between what the price is doing and what the TCI is doing. And what I mean by that is look, for example, what was going on in the spring, and I'll zoom in on this in a moment. You can see that we spiked up to the highest at around January, around 40K, and then we were just setting in lower highs ever since, and for the most part lower lows, or at least equal lows ever since then on this move up. So price was moving up, but the TCI is moving down. So that can be seen as a bearish divergence, right? So even though price is moving up, the trend confidence is dropping the entire time, suggesting that uptrend is likely to be petering out, likely to be ending, and indeed that's what we saw. Same thing actually happened in this move here. There's actually this massive bearish divergence where it was highest actually in the move out of the summer, and then this move back up into November was not able to set in a higher high, which is a kind of a bearish divergence, a warning sign before this big crash that we ended up getting. So that's another thing I think is interesting to look at with this indicator. So let's zoom in on more recent price action, because I think this really exemplifies where this indicator can be that leading indicator, can be a canary in the coal mine. So this is not the only case it's done this. As I mentioned with those previous market cycle tops, for example, it'll act as a leading indicator. But here I think we can see that very clearly. So here we are running up to January. This is the Bitcoin price in yellow. And you'll notice that for the most part, the TCI is staying green. There's this little kind of blip down in below zero here, but then quickly flipping bullish again as we were moving back up to the upside. And then we got this breakdown off of the 40K level that it flips bearish down during this. It actually gives a pretty nice advanced warning of that. See, it flips bearish all the way up here before we had that much bigger capitulation move down to the downside before then being able to move back up. But then you'll notice that it does get again bullish after we are able to pop back up above this level, but it's not entirely convinced at this point. And then it flips back down red, and then just stays red all throughout the rest of this move here, suggesting that it's just not confident in this uptrend, right? If the price is moving up, but the TCI is in the red, if it's below zero, that suggests low confidence in that move. That suggests that from the TCI's perspective, we shouldn't necessarily be believing this move to the upside. And indeed, we then got that 50% correction to the downside. It was giving an advance warning that this was playing with fire for some degree. That even though prices continue to move up, its sustainability to the upside is getting very questionable. And then we got a crash to the downside. But then you'll notice that in the summer, we get this very, very early bullish flip on the TCI, right? So it starts to kind of doubt the downtrend in this kind of relief rally we had up here, flips back down into the red, and then really it's at around July of 2021 or late June that it kind of pops above zero and just stays there. Even as price is grinding down, it's still maintaining a bullish bias. It thinks that this downtrend is not entirely believable. It thinks that there's likely to be upside, a reversal that's likely to be coming. And indeed, that exactly happens, coming off of here. So again, this isn't nailing the exact bottom, but that's not the point. The point is to give you an advanced warning that, hey, start to pay attention because this downtrend is becoming less and less believable. It seems like this is setting the stage for some upside, and that's exactly what happened. And then as we got to that El Salvador Day, we got that big capitulation here in early September. That's where it flips bearish, going into this kind of correction we saw in September, leading into the beginning of October. And then it flips bullish again as we rallied out of October. But you'll notice then that it breaks down. It's not getting nearly as excited as it was up here coming out of the summer. And then we get this breakdown coming off of this capitulation shortly after the all-time high, and then it just stayed bearish the entire time after that. So it wasn't tricked by this false breakout we got around Christmas. It wasn't tricked by some of these other moves up. It just stayed bearish. It said, we're in a downtrend, and I believe it's in a downtrend. But then we started getting this divergence, right? We started moving up on the TCI as price was moving down for Bitcoin. And then that culminated in this point here where we actually started to flip bullish right before that 11% candle day that Bitcoin had breaking out to the upside, right? You'll see that it's just below zero at that point. And had you been watching this in real time, this would have flipped bullish very early on in that 11% candle day, and then we moved back up to the upside. And you'll notice that now we're very much in the green zone. We're actually more bullish right now the TCI has more confidence in this uptrend than it had in the uptrend moving out of October, which I think, or excuse me, into October and in November, which I think is notable. Now, it's not as high as it was, coming out of the summer, not quite yet, but it'll be interesting to see that we broke well up, and then with this more recent move to the upside that Bitcoin's been putting in today, we're moving back up there as well, which I think is a very potentially bullish sign. It's suggesting that the TCI has decent confidence right now in this uptrend. Now, this doesn't mean that the uptrend has to continue necessarily, though, of course. One way of looking at this is you could say, okay, well, maybe it called the uptrend quite early. For all we know, this is the main action that's going to happen from this uptrend. This doesn't mean the uptrend has to continue. If this rolls over and falls back below zero, then, this uptrend that we're seeing right now, maybe this was as much kind of upside as we were going to get out of this localized uptrend before crashing back below zero. There's no guarantee, but certainly it's a good sign. And the longer that the TCI stays above zero, the more confident in some ways we can get that the trend is to the bullish side. Because that's tended to be what's happened in the past, right? When we flip above zero, we get at least some upside usually before flipping back below. So while we stay this extended to the upside, I think that's bullish, and it's very plausible to me that price will continue to go up to meet this. And then it's more when this starts rolling back down to the downside, I get more concerned. Then especially when we flip below zero, that's when I get quite concerned. Or if price is moving up, but then we flip below zero, again, it would be a sign for alarm that maybe we're starting to kind of exhaust that uptrend that we might be in before a downtrend is going to follow to maybe. And again, that doesn't mean we can't be in a macro uptrend while that's happening, but it just means that there's some more short-term caution that might be necessary for that period. So we can also visualize this again just by looking at, color coding the price action to the TCI. And again, you can see exactly what I was just talking about, where generally bullish on the up move here, but then getting increasingly concerned as we got into the spring and then proceeding that downtrend, and then getting bullish in well before the actual bottom. So getting bullish saying, hey, pay attention, we might be getting to a bottom soon. And then sure enough, popping back to the upside, we got this correction, very much bearish on this downtrend, and then flipping bullish as we popped into this recent price reversal. So overall, I just think that TCI is a very interesting indicator, and what I really like about it is it's not specific to Bitcoin. It's not asset specific. You can apply the TCI to any crypto asset, and I've been looking through different ones. In future videos, I'll be showing TCIs for other assets. It works quite well, just like we're seeing here for Bitcoin. It works well for other assets, and oftentimes can give an advance warning of when the party's over on an uptrend, or when the pain is maybe starting to get exhausted to the downside. So I think that what my overall evaluation of this indicator is, I think it's useful on its own, but I think it's especially useful when you take it into consideration in conjunction with other indicators like the UDPI, for example. Because what the UDPI, in conjunction with the TCI, for example, it could have been telling you that the summer was an especially low risk on the UDPI, which it was, very low risk, and then if the TCI is flipping bullish off of a super low risk zone, that could probably be read as, okay, we're probably likely to be getting near to a macro bottom, and upside is probably likely to follow that, right? Because if you're that low risk, then upside is kind of the path of least resistance, and if the trend seems to be breaking to the downside, then maybe we should start paying attention that upside might come relatively soon. Likewise, with the downside, if risk is super high, like it was over this time, and you see the TCI becoming extremely unconvinced by this grind up in price, this uptrend here, then that would be, okay, this is very worrying. We might expect some capitulation off of this, some crash. It's exactly what we saw. Same thing up here. The UDPI was getting not super overextended, but it was getting up closer to around 2 on the Bitcoin UDPI. And when the TCI flips bearish off of that, it's very plausible to see some downside off of that, and that's exactly what we saw. But then same thing, with the UDPI being so low risk here, but then the TCI flipping green, that might be an indicator that we're actually likely to see some upside from here. So this isn't financial advice. You should form your own opinions. And of course, nothing's guaranteed. This doesn't say we have to go exploding from here. But if the past is a predictor of the future, this kind of setup is not entirely dissimilar to what we've seen before here. TCI flipped it bullish a little bit earlier in the summer than it did here, but it's still relatively early that it flipped bullish. It's flipping bullish right around here. Then we saw this big move back up to the upside. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from here. And really, that's the way I'm going to be one of the ways that I'm going to personally be looking at the TCI is using it in conjunction with UDPI. Though that said, I will be doing some videos in the future where I show some simulations based on the TCI. There's really interesting results you can get just purely trading based on the TCI. But I think one of the more interesting ways of using it is in conjunction with other indicators. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. And remember, with UDPI and now with the TCI, we're all going to make it.